The first thing I saw when I woke up was white ceiling tiles. The second thing was the 4-tube in my arm. The third thing was the empty chair next to my hospital bed where my brother should have been sitting. I pressed the call button, and Nurse Patricia came in with that gentle smile they trained them to wear. "How are you feeling, Keane?" she asked, checking my chart. My throat felt like sandpaper, but I managed to croak out the question that had been eating at me since the anesthesia wore off. "Has my brother visited yet?" She paused, that brief hesitation that tells you everything. "No, honey, not yet." I nodded and closed my eyes. Emergency surgery for a burst appendix, and Hadley couldn't even show up. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister-in-law, Sophie. "Hadley says he's swamped with a big pitch. Sends his love." I stared at the message for a long moment, then did something I probably shouldn't have. I opened social media. There was Hadley, grinning in his golf clothes at some charity fundraiser. Posted 3 hours ago. The same day, I nearly died on an operating table. The days blended together in that sterile room. Beeping machines, terrible coffee, and the constant hope that maybe today would be the day Hadley walked through that door. But he never did. Old friends from high school came by. My neighbor brought homemade cookies. Even my accountant stopped in to check on me. But my own brother? Radio silence. I kept thinking about what our mother used to say before she passed. "You boys are all each other has left. Promise me you'll always be there for each other." I kept that promise. I was there when Hadley's first business failed. I was there when his marriage hit rough patches. I was there when Mom got sick, handling her medical bills while Hadley showed up for the photo opportunities with flowers and smiles. But lying in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles I had memorized, I realized something that hit me harder than the surgery pain. Hadley had never really been there for me. Not once. He just knew I'd always be there for him. And maybe that was the problem. On day 4, I finally saw my brother. But not the way I expected. I was dozing when I heard his voice in the hallway, that loud, confident tone he used when he was trying to impress someone. "The Hargrove Group has excellent relationships with regional banks," he was saying. "We understand the local market better than anyone." I sat up, heart racing. Was he finally coming to see me? I watched through my door's window as Hadley walked past with a well-dressed older man. They didn't stop. They didn't even glance in. Hadley was conducting business in the hospital corridor, and he couldn't spare 2 minutes to check on his brother, who'd just had emergency surgery. The older man Hadley was with stopped at my door and peered in, looking confused. "Excuse me," he said, stepping inside. "I think I'm lost. Looking for room 314. I pointed down the hall, but something made me ask, "Are you working with my brother Hadley?" The man's face lit up. "Hargrove Group, yes. Hadley's been helping us with some complex account structuring. Very creative with dormant partnerships." He paused, studying my face. "Though between you and me, some of his methods seem a bit unconventional." That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the pain, but because of what the banker had said. Dormant partnerships. Unconventional methods. I knew Hadley's business had been struggling. Real estate had been tough the last few years. But something about the way that man spoke made my keen each twist. When the nurse brought my evening medication, I asked to borrow her laptop. "For work emails," I said. What I found made me forget all about my surgical pain. My name was listed as a silent partner in something called Hargrove Holdings LLC, an account I'd never opened, never signed for, never even heard of. But there it was, with my social security number, my signature, and my clean credit history attached to it. The account showed millions in transactions over the past 2 years. Real estate deals, equipment purchases, loan guarantees, all flowing through an LLC that bore my name, but was controlled entirely by Hadley. My hands shook as I scrolled through the documents. He hadn't just ignored me in the hospital. He'd been using me, my identity, my reputation, for years. Without telling me. Without asking. Without caring what it might cost me. 2 weeks after I got home, I invited Hadley and Sophie over for dinner. I cooked his favorite meal, set the table with Mom's good china, and waited. When they arrived, Hadley was all smiles and apologies. "Sorry I couldn't make it to the hospital, brother. You know how it is with work." I nodded and served the meal. We made small talk about the weather, Sophie's job at the school, Hadley's latest deals. Normal family conversation. Then I set a folder next to his plate. "I found something interesting while I was recovering," I said calmly. Hadley opened the folder, and his face went white. Bank statements, LLC documents, loan applications. All with my name, none with my knowledge. What is this? Sophie asked, looking between us. Hadley's jaw tightened. It's nothing. Just paperwork. Keane, you're making a big deal out of nothing. I leaned back in my chair. Nothing? My name is on millions of dollars in transactions I never approved. Hadley's mask slipped. Look, you owe me. All those years I carried you, helped you out. This is just evening the score. I almost laughed. Carried me? Hadley, I paid for Mom's medical bills while you played golf. I loaned you money for 3 failed businesses. When exactly did you carry me? The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I called Hadley's bank and requested a meeting. As the listed partner on the Hargrove Holdings LLC, I had every legal right to review the account activity. What I learned made my blood run cold. Hadley had been using our LLC to wash money through multiple real estate deals, creating artificial partnerships to avoid tax obligations and hide assets from creditors. And my name was on everything. When I walked out of that bank, I had 2 things: complete legal authority over the LLC as the primary signatory, and evidence that Hadley had forged my signature on at least a dozen documents. I made one phone call to the bank manager. I need all account activity frozen pending a compliance review. There may be unauthorized transactions under my name. The manager's voice was professional but concerned. Of course, Mr. Hargrove. We'll implement an immediate freeze while we investigate. I hung up and sat in my car for a long moment. Part of me felt sick, but a bigger part felt something I hadn't felt in years when it came to Hadley. Power. For once, I wasn't cleaning up his mess. I was stopping it. The call came at 7:30 that evening. Hadley's voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the panic underneath. Keane, we need to talk. Now. 20 minutes later, he was pounding on my front door like a madman. Open up. What did you do? I watched him through the window, pacing on my porch, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing wildly. He looked desperate. Good. I opened the door and leaned against the frame, arms crossed. Hey, Hadley. How was your day? His face was red, veins bulging in his neck. Don't play games with me. The bank froze everything. They're saying you requested it. I nodded calmly. I did. Turns out when someone uses your name without permission, you have rights. Hadley pushed past me into my living room. You don't understand. I've got deals closing, payments due. You're going to ruin everything. I closed the door and turned to face him. No, Hadley. You already did that when you decided my name was yours to use. He started pacing again, running his hands through his hair. This is insane. We're family. I sat down in my recliner, the same chair I'd sat in during my recovery while he played golf. Funny, I didn't feel much like a family lying in that hospital bed. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I knew Hadley, and I knew he wouldn't give up easily. Sure enough, on Thursday morning, I found a brand new pickup truck in my driveway. Red, fully loaded, with a bow on the hood like something from a commercial. Hadley emerged from the driver's seat with his biggest smile. Surprise, brother. Thought you could use an upgrade. I walked around the truck, admiring it despite myself. It was beautiful. Expensive. What's this about, Hadley? He threw his arm around my shoulder like we were teenagers again. Can't a guy do something nice for his brother? Especially after everything. Everything. As if my emergency surgery was just a minor inconvenience. I also talked to that guy who does your lawn. Paid him for the whole year. And there's more where this came from if you just call the bank and straighten out this misunderstanding. I pulled out my phone and hit record. So you're saying if I unfreeze the accounts, you'll give me more gifts? Hadley grinned, not noticing the phone. Absolutely. Hell, I'll even throw in that vacation you've been talking about. We're partners, Keane. Partners take care of each other. He kept talking, admitting to signing my name, explaining how he'd cleaned up some transactions, describing exactly how he'd used my identity. All recorded. All admissible. Thanks for the truck, Hadley, I said finally. But I think I'll keep the accounts frozen. The call came at midnight. Sophie's voice was thick with tears. Keane, I don't know what's happening. Our mortgage payment bounced. The bank says our accounts are frozen. Hadley won't talk to me. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. Sophie, slow down. What exactly did the bank tell you? Through her sobs, the story came out. Their personal accounts were linked to the LLC through some complex arrangement Hadley had set up. When I froze the LLC, it triggered reviews on all connected accounts. I didn't even know your name was on our accounts, she cried. Hadley said it was just paperwork, Something about tax benefits. My heart ached for her. Sophie was a good person, a teacher who worked with special needs kids. She didn't deserve to be caught up in Hadley's schemes. Keane, I need to ask you something, and please don't hate me for it. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You were always the decent one. The honest one. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd married you instead of Hadley. The line went quiet except for her soft crying. I closed my eyes, remembering the girl Hadley had stolen from me in college with his charm and grand promises. Sophie, I'm going to help you. But not Hadley. Just you. You didn't sign up for this. 2 weeks later, I got a call that made my coffee taste bitter. Mr. Hargrove, this is Agent Williams with the Internal Revenue Service. We need to schedule a meeting regarding some flagged accounts. My Keane dropped. I'd expected bank scrutiny, but the IRS was a different level of serious. Of course, I managed. Am I in trouble? Agent Williams' voice was professional, but not unkind. Sir, your name appears on several accounts with significant unreported income. We need to determine your level of involvement. The meeting was scheduled for Friday. I spent the next 3 days gathering every document I could find, every email, every text message that proved I had no knowledge of Hadley's activities. When I walked into that sterile IRS office, I carried a folder thick with evidence. Agent Williams was younger than I expected, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. Mr. Hargrove, you're listed as the primary partner on accounts that show over $2.3 million in unreported income over 2 years. I slid my folder across the table. Agent Williams, I didn't know those accounts existed until 2 weeks ago. Everything you need to prove is in this folder. As she reviewed my evidence, her expression shifted from suspicion to understanding to something that looked like sympathy. Mr. Hargrove, it appears you've been the victim of identity fraud. Your brother used your information to establish these accounts. I nodded. I'm cooperating fully. Whatever you need from me. Hadley's counterattack came swift and vicious. By Monday morning, half the town was buzzing with his version of events. I stopped at the diner for breakfast and felt the stares, heard the whispers. Keane Hargrove went crazy, I heard someone say, trying to destroy his own brother over jealousy. At the hardware store, old Pete Wilson actually confronted me. Heard you're causing trouble for Hadley. That boy's been good to this town. I just nodded and bought my nails. No point arguing with gossip. But Hadley wasn't done. He took out an ad in the local paper. Sometimes family betrayal comes from the most unexpected places. Prayers appreciated during this difficult time. Classy. Real classy. That afternoon, I got a visit from Pastor Matthews. Keane, I'm concerned about the talk around town. Hadley says you're trying to ruin him. I invited the pastor in, made coffee, and showed him the same documents I'd shown the IRS. 20 minutes later, Pastor Matthews was shaking his head. I'm sorry, Keane. I should have known better. Hadley always was good with words. As he left, he paused at my door. The truth has a way of coming out, son. Be patient. I was learning patience. But I was also learning something else. Sometimes the truth needs help coming out. The call from First National Bank came on a Tuesday morning. Mr. Hargrove, this is Janet Foster, the branch manager. Could you come in at your earliest convenience? There are some matters we need to discuss regarding your accounts. When I walked into that bank, everything felt different. Janet Foster stood to greet me, shaking my hand with both of hers. Mr. Hargrove, thank you for coming. Please, have a seat. Her assistant brought coffee in real china cups, not paper. I was being treated like someone important. Mr. Hargrove, after our investigation, we need to clarify something. You are the legal primary owner of Hargrove Holdings, LLC. Your signature predates your brother's on all founding documents. She slid a stack of papers across her desk. These accounts contain substantial assets. Real estate holdings, investment portfolios, liquid cash reserves. As of today, you have complete control over approximately $3.2 million in assets. I nearly choked on my coffee. That much. Janet nodded gravely. Your brother was creative in his accounting. But legally, ethically, and practically, these assets belong to you. Your brother was essentially an unauthorized user of your company. I stared at the documents, my name clearly printed as primary owner and managing partner. For years, I'd felt like Hadley's junior partner in life. Now, legally, he was mine. The domino effect started small. Hadley had been courting a major client, a development group looking to build a shopping center outside town. When word spread about the account freeze and IRS investigation, they got nervous. The client, Madison Development, had been one of Hadley's biggest potential scores. A multi-million-dollar deal that would have set him up for years. But Madison's CEO was a cautious man who'd built his reputation on clean deals. When he heard about the federal investigation, he pulled out. The funny thing was, Madison's CEO was Jake Gomez, my old high school buddy. The same Jake who'd visited me in the hospital while Hadley played golf. "Keane," Jake said when he called. "I had no idea Hadley was your brother when we started talking business. After what I heard about the bank situation, we decided to look elsewhere." He paused. "But if you're ever interested in legitimate development consulting, give me a call. We could use someone with integrity on our team." I thanked him and hung up, then allowed myself a small smile. Hadley had always said success was about who you knew. He was right. It was just never the people he thought mattered. The people who mattered were the ones who visited you in hospitals, not the ones who schmoozed at golf courses. That evening, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in months. I went to Mom's old cedar chest and pulled out her letters. She'd been a great letter writer, always putting her thoughts on paper. The one I was looking for was Near the Boat, Keane, written just weeks before she died. Her handwriting was shaky but still unmistakably hers. "My dear boys," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I pray you're taking care of each other. Keane, you have such a gentle heart, sometimes too gentle. Don't let people take advantage of your kindness. Hadley, you have such drive and ambition. But remember that family matters more than any deal. Hadley needs you. Keane, even when he doesn't deserve it. And Keane, Hadley loves you, even when he doesn't show it well." I folded the letter carefully, my hands shaking slightly. Mom always saw the best in people, especially her sons. But sitting in her old rocking chair, surrounded by her things, I wondered if she'd known the truth about Hadley. If she'd seen his selfishness and written that letter anyway, hoping love could change him. Or if she'd genuinely believed he was just misguided. Either way, her words made me pause. Was I being too harsh? Was there still a chance to save my brother instead of destroying him? The next day, I drove to the storage unit Hadley and I had shared since Mom died. We'd split the cost of keeping her furniture and belongings until we decided what to do with them. I hadn't been there in over a year. The unit smelled like dust and old memories. Mom's dining room set, her china cabinet, boxes of photo albums and keepsakes. But in the back corner, I found something that didn't belong to Mom. A file cabinet I'd never seen before, locked with a simple padlock. The bolt cutters from my truck made quick work of it. Inside were folders Hadley had hidden. Bank statements going back 5 years. Forged documents with my signature. Loan applications I'd never seen. And something that made my blood boil. Records from Mom's final medical bills. She'd needed specialized treatment that insurance didn't cover. I'd emptied my savings account to pay for it, thinking Hadley couldn't contribute because his business was struggling. But the documents showed Hadley had taken money from our shared account. Money Mom had saved for her own funeral, and used it for a down payment on a boat. A boat he'd bought while I was paying for Mom's cancer treatment. While I was visiting her every day, holding her hand through chemo, Hadley was out on his new boat, telling everyone how hard it was to watch his mother suffer. I sat in that dusty storage unit, surrounded by Mom's things, and felt something break inside me. Not my heart. That had been broken for a while. Something harder. My willingness to excuse him. The news that Hadley was visiting Dad's grave spread through town like wildfire. In a place where everyone knows everyone, a grown man sobbing at a headstone draws attention. I drove to Oakwood Cemetery that afternoon, not to confront him, but to see for myself. Hadley was kneeling at Dad's grave, shoulders shaking with what looked like genuine grief. For a moment, I felt that old protective instinct. The same feeling I'd had when we were kids, and Hadley would get scared during thunderstorms. But then I noticed the Channel 7 news van parked across the cemetery road, and the photographer with the long lens camera hiding behind the maintenance shed. Hadley wasn't grieving privately. He was performing grief, making sure the whole town could see how the family scandal was breaking his heart. As I watched, Hadley pulled out his phone and took a selfie next to Dad's headstone. He posted it immediately with the caption, "Some family betrayals cut deeper than death. Dad, help me understand why Keane is doing this to us." Within an hour, the post had 50 comments, most of them supporting Hadley and condemning me. I screenshot the post, and added it to my growing collection of evidence. Not for the IRS or the bank, but for myself. A reminder of exactly who my brother really was. The lawsuit arrived on a Thursday, delivered by a nervous young process server who kept apologizing. Hadley Hargrove versus Keane Hargrove. Damages for tortious interference and sabotage of business relations. Hadley was suing me for $5 million, claiming I had deliberately destroyed his business relationships and caused him financial harm. The petition painted me as a jealous, vindictive brother who couldn't stand Hadley's success. It claimed I had manipulated banking relationships and conspired to damage the plaintiff's reputation through false accusations. Reading it felt surreal. According to Hadley's lawyer, I was a master manipulator who had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to destroy my innocent brother. The Hadley in the lawsuit was a hard-working family man, victimized by a sibling's jealousy. There was no mention of forged signatures, hidden accounts, or stolen identities. Just poor Hadley, betrayed by his evil brother Keane. I called my lawyer, Bill Hampton, a quiet man who'd handled Mom's estate. "Keane, this is mostly bluster," he said after reviewing the documents. "But we need to respond. And I think it's time we filed our own action." That afternoon, I authorized Bill to file a countersuit. Fraud, identity theft, breach of fiduciary duty, and conversion of assets. Unlike Hadley's emotional accusations, our filing was backed by documents, recordings, and federal investigation findings. The war was officially on. The courthouse was packed on the day of our hearing. Word had spread through town, and people came like it was entertainment. Hadley sat at the plaintiff's table in his best suit, looking confident and wronged. His lawyer was expensive, brought in from the state capitol. I sat with Bill Hampton, my folder of evidence on the table between us. Judge Patricia Coleman was known for her no-nonsense approach and her distaste for frivolous lawsuits. She'd been on the bench for 20 years and could smell BS from across the courtroom. Hadley's lawyer went first, painting a picture of brotherly jealousy and business sabotage. He was theatrical, emotional, appealing to family values and small-town loyalty. When he finished, Judge Coleman looked unimpressed. "Mr. Hampton, your response?" Bill stood slowly, walked to the evidence table, and pulled out a small digital recorder. "Your Honor, I'd like to play a recording that demonstrates the true nature of this relationship." Hadley's confident expression flickered. He leaned over to whisper something to his lawyer, who looked suddenly uncomfortable. The courtroom fell silent as my recording played. Hadley's voice filled the room, admitting to forging my signature, describing how he'd cleaned up transactions, offering me bribes to keep quiet. When it finished, Judge Coleman looked at Hadley with obvious disgust. "Mr. Hargrove, did you make these statements?" Hadley's lawyer started to object, but Hadley cut him off. "Your Honor, those statements were taken out of context." "Context?" Judge Coleman's voice was ice-cold. "The context where you admit to fraud." After the hearing, I expected Hadley to retreat, to let his lawyers handle things. Instead, he showed up at my house that same evening. But this wasn't the angry, demanding Hadley from before. This was someone I barely recognized. He stood on my porch without the usual swagger, shoulders slumped, looking older than his 42 years. "Keane, can we talk?" His voice was quiet, defeated. I let him in, and he sat heavily in Mom's old chair. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Hadley looked up at me with eyes I remembered from childhood, before the arrogance and selfishness took over. "I need your help." 3 words I'd waited years to hear, but not like this. Not from a broken man backed into a corner. "The bank is foreclosing on the house. Sophie's talking about leaving. My business is finished." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from when we were kids and he'd gotten in trouble. "I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you. I know I've been a terrible brother." His voice cracked slightly. "But I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to be better." For the first time in decades, I saw something in Hadley that looked like genuine remorse. Not the calculating self-pity he'd shown before, but real recognition of what he'd done. "Keane, I've been jealous of you my whole life. You were always the good one, the one Mom and Dad were proud of. I thought if I could just be successful enough, important enough, maybe I'd matter as much as you did." I sat down across from him, studying his face. "Hadley, all you had to do was be my brother. That's all I ever wanted." What Hadley was asking for wasn't money. It wasn't even forgiveness, exactly. He wanted me to sign papers giving him partial control back over the LLC, enough to save his house and maybe salvage some business relationships. In exchange, he offered complete transparency, full accounting of everything he'd done, and legal agreements that would prevent him from ever using my name again. "I'll sign whatever you want," he said. "Contracts, oversight agreements, whatever makes you comfortable. Just don't let me lose everything." I stared at the papers he'd brought, legal documents his attorney had drawn up. They were surprisingly fair, giving me majority control while allowing Hadley enough access to pay his debts and start over. But I'd learned not to trust Hadley's offers. "There's one condition," I said finally. "You sign a complete confession detailing everything you did, every account you opened, every signature you forged. And you agree to enter that confession into the court record." Hadley's face went pale. "Keane, that could mean criminal charges." I nodded. "It could, but it's the only way I can trust you again. Complete honesty or nothing." He stared at the floor for a long time. When he looked up, there was something different in his eyes. Resignation, maybe, or relief. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll sign it." As he wrote out his confession in careful handwriting, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction or victory, but sadness. This was my brother, reduced to begging for mercy from the person he'd spent years betraying. The person who'd still rather save him than destroy him. I should have known Hadley would try one last trick. 3 days after signing his confession and our agreement, he filed an emergency motion claiming I had coerced him under duress. His new filing claimed I had threatened him and forced him to sign documents while he was in an emotionally compromised state. It was exactly the kind of move Hadley always made: agree to something, then find a way to weasel out of it when he thought of a better angle. But Hadley had made one crucial mistake. He didn't know I'd been busy those 3 days. While he was planning his latest scheme, I'd been meeting with my lawyer and a representative from the Children's Hospital Foundation. The day before Hadley filed his motion, I had already transferred ownership of the entire LLC to a charitable trust. The Hargrove Holdings Trust, established to fund medical care for children whose families couldn't afford treatment. The same kind of care Mom had needed. The trust was irrevocable, managed by independent trustees, with one very specific provision: no member of the Hargrove family could ever control or benefit from the trust's assets. Hadley's motion was asking the court to give him control of assets that no longer existed under my name. When his lawyer tried to explain this to the judge, Hadley's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, rage. "You can't do that," he shouted, standing up in court. "That's my money too." Judge Coleman banged her gavel. "Mr. Hargrove, sit down. And Mr. Hampton, please explain to the court exactly what Mr. Hadley Hargrove has done." Bill stood calmly. "Your Honor, my client has donated the disputed assets to charity. There are no longer any business interests for Mr. Hadley Hargrove to claim." By Sunday, everyone at First Baptist knew. In a town of 3,000 people, news travels faster than gossip, and the story of the Hargrove brothers had become both. I walked into church that morning expecting stares and whispers. What I got was something different. Mrs. Patterson, who'd taught both Hadley and me in Sunday school, squeezed my hand. "Your mother would be proud, Keane." Jake Gomez's wife, Carol, nodded approvingly. "Takes integrity to give up that kind of money." Even Pastor Matthews adjusted his sermon, speaking about biblical brothers and the difference between Cain's jealousy and Joseph's forgiveness. He never mentioned names, but everyone knew. "Sometimes," he said from the pulpit, "the greatest act of love is holding someone accountable for their actions. And sometimes the greatest act of faith is trusting God with justice instead of taking revenge." After the service, people lingered to talk. Not to gossip, but to share their own stories. How Hadley had overcharged them for real estate deals. How he'd made promises he didn't keep. How they'd stayed quiet because he was Keane Hargrove's brother, and Keane was a good man. "We should have spoken up sooner," said Helen Wright, whose elderly mother Hadley had convinced to refinance her paid-off house. "But you know how he was. All charm and threats." I realized that Hadley's downfall hadn't started with me freezing the accounts. It had started years ago, with every person he'd cheated, every trust he'd broken, every relationship he'd damaged with his greed and arrogance. The for sale sign went up on Hadley's house on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday, the moving truck was there. I watched from my kitchen window as Hadley and Sophie loaded boxes, their movements sharp with anger and hurt. Sophie caught me watching once and gave a small wave. Hadley turned his back. The house sold quickly, bought by a young family with 2 small children. The irony wasn't lost on me. The house Hadley had bought with stolen money would now shelter an honest family trying to build something real. Hadley's real estate office closed the following week. The Hargrove Group sign came down, replaced by a simple for lease placard. His secretary, Janet, found work at the insurance agency. His assistant started her own bookkeeping business. Everyone moved on except Hadley. The rumor was he'd taken a job in Columbus, something in commercial sales. Sophie had filed for divorce and moved back in with her sister. She'd stopped by once to thank me for helping her separate her finances from Hadley's mess. I should have seen it sooner, she'd said. But he was so good at making his problems seem like everyone else's fault. The last I heard, Hadley was living in a studio apartment, driving a used car, starting over at 42 with nothing but his charm and his schemes. In a way, I felt sorry for him, but not sorry enough to regret my choices. The letter arrived on a Saturday, mixed in with bills and advertisements. My name was written in handwriting I recognized, though it looked shakier than usual. No return address, but the postmark said Columbus. I almost threw it away without opening it. Almost. Keane, it began. No, dear brother, or to my family. Just my name. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I have no right to contact you after everything I did. But I needed to write this, even if you throw it away without reading it. You were right about everything. I was jealous, I was selfish, and I was wrong. I spent so many years telling myself that I deserved what I took, that you owed me something, that I was just evening the score. But lying here in this crappy apartment, with no friends, no family, no business, I can see the truth. I never deserved your grace. I never earned your loyalty. I took advantage of your love because I knew you'd always forgive me, until you couldn't anymore. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even want it, because that would just be another thing I don't deserve. I just want you to know that I finally understand what I lost. Not the money or the business or the house. I lost my brother, the only person who ever really loved me unconditionally. And I threw it away for what? Pride? Greed? Fear that I wasn't good enough? I hope you sleep better than I do. I hope the charity helps a lot of kids. And I hope someday you can remember the good times we had before I ruined everything. Your brother, Hadley. I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it in Mom's old recipe box with her letters. 6 months later, I was sitting on my front porch with my morning coffee when the phone rang. The voice was professional, excited. Mr. Hargrove, this is Amanda Foster from Children's Hospital Foundation. I wanted to personally thank you for your incredible generosity. The Hargrove Holdings Trust had generated its first round of grants. 12 children would receive surgery or treatment their families couldn't afford. Kids with conditions like the one that had put me in the hospital, where Hadley never visited. One of the families specifically asked me to thank you. Amanda continued. Their little girl needed emergency surgery, and the trust covered everything. They said to tell you that angels come in many forms. I hung up and sipped my coffee, watching the sun rise over the town where I'd lived my whole life. The same town where Hadley had tried to be king, where he'd charmed and cheated and finally fallen. Neighbors waved as they walked their dogs. Jake Gomez's construction crew was building a new playground at the elementary school. Life went on, steady and honest and real. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. She'd remarried, a teacher from her school district. The message was a photo of her at a school picnic, smiling genuinely for the first time in years. Thank you for everything, the caption read. You saved my life too. I thought about Hadley in his Columbus apartment, starting over with nothing but his wits and his regrets. Part of me hoped he'd learned something, found some peace, maybe even some honesty. But that wasn't my responsibility anymore. My responsibility was here, in this town, in this life I'd built on simple principles Mom had taught me. Work hard. Tell the truth. Take care of people who can't take care of themselves. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone. Sometimes it's just about refusing to let them destroy you. And sometimes, if you're patient enough, the truth finds its own way to the surface.